Yo, what's up guys, and welcome back to a new video. Today we will be looking at Black Rook Hold and how to deal with it. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. When we first step foot in the dungeon, we're faced off with some ghostly mobs. These mobs will have a few abilities that will do damage to random targeted players. To deal with these, you just need to make sure to kick whenever you have a kick available to reduce the incoming damage. There is one mob we do face doing slightly more damage, being Kur'thalos Ravencrest. He will cast two abilities we'll need to be aware of. First off, his spam casts Spirit Blast on random targets, which you will want to stop to reduce the incoming damage. Secondly, he will cast Soul Echoes on a random player. This will keep spawning circles underneath the player that will explode for significant damage and fear the player standing inside of it. Make sure to move out of this as fast as possible to not get feared and not take a chunk of damage. Now that we've dealt with the first Thrash in the area, it's time to face the Amalgam of Souls. I consider this boss as one of the easier bosses in the season, but we will need to keep our eyes open since mistakes are pretty deadly on this fight. First off, we deal with Swirling Scythe. This will prioritize target ranged players and throw a scythe their way, which will spin in place. If you get hit by this, you will lose a large chunk of HP, so keep your eyes open for this since it's quite hard to see. Next up, the boss uses the same ability we saw before, being Soul Echoes. This works the same as Kur'thalos, and you just need to make sure to move out of the circles to avoid getting a big hit and being feared. Next up, the boss will cast a frontal called Reap Souls. This will be a 180 degrees frontal cone faced towards the tank, which will kill everyone standing inside of it. As a tank, you will want to face this in a convenient spot opposite of all the other range players. The last thing we will have to deal with is the intermission. The boss will call souls from all sides of the room, which you will need to kill before they reach the boss. You can use grips and CC for this, however, so a lot of groups opt in to mass grip them into one spot and AoE them down if possible. After the channel is done, the boss will explode, dealing a massive chunk of damage onto the group, which will be increased by the souls that have reached the boss. Next up, we will face some new mobs, and most of these are pretty harmless, but there is a few of them that we need to cover since they will do heavy damage if not handled correctly. The Soul Torn Champion will cast a frontal periodically towards the tank, which we will just simply need to move out of. The Risen Archers will periodically cast Arrow Barrage. When this happens, they jump to a target and start shooting arrows in a frontal cone, dealing heavy damage to everyone in the way. You will want to immediately walk out of these or stop the cast when they happen, since this will do heavy damage. After dealing with a few packs of these annoying mobs, we'll face the second boss, being Illysanna Ravencrest. This boss seems quite hectic, but it's fairly easy if dealt with properly. The boss will periodically cast Brutal Glaive. This ability will target a player and throw a glaive at them. You can see who's being targeted by the red arrow and purplish circle around them. When this cast is on you, you will need to make sure to move out of the group to prevent cleaving on your party members who are within the circle. Next up, we'll see Vengeful Shear being your basic tank buster. Make sure you have some mitigation up for this since it's a quite significant hit. For the third ability, we see Dark Rush. The boss will indicate 3 players with a red mark above their head, and after a while, the boss will rush towards these players, leaving a stripe of fel behind. It's important that you and your party members try to position this towards a convenient spot to preserve some more space. Throughout the fight, a fury bar will fill up for the boss, and when it reaches 100%, the boss will jump up and spawn adds that we need to cleave down. While this happens, a player will be targeted by eye beams. This ability will follow the player around and leave fel behind on the places it has covered. So when you are targeted, make sure to prioritize preserving space by filling up the sides and back parts of the room first. For the next mobs on the list, we'll see the Revguard Blade Lord. This mob is very dangerous for tanks because of their Brutal Assault cast. The Brutal Assault will do heavy damage every 0.5 seconds for a total of 2 seconds. This is not interruptible, but you can however outrange it when slowing the mob or prevent the damage by stunning the mob while its cast has begun. There's 2 more mobs that we'll have to talk about before heading to the boss, being the Felbat Pups and the Felspite Dominators. The Felbat Pups and Felspite Dominators both use an ability called Sick Bats. This will move all the aggro from the bats over to a random player. So if you're a tank, make sure that you're on your feet with taunts. Secondly, the Felspite Dominators will cast Fel Frenzy. This is a priority kick as it increases all the damage done by 50% for 20 seconds of all the nearby mobs. Now that we've dealt with all of the Thrash, we can talk about Smashspite the Hateful. This boss is mostly a mechanical check, so by following this strategy you should be perfectly fine. The main ability of this boss is Brutal Haymaker. When the boss reaches 100 energy, he will smack the tank for a massive amount of damage and increases the damage done to this target by 75% for 10 seconds. Make sure you have some mitigation up for this, because you will most likely die if you don't. The amount of energy the boss produces is based on how much percentage mitigation the tank has up while being attacked by the boss. The boss gains 10 energy per hit, minus 1 energy per 10% active mitigation used. So if you're a tank, try to manage your mitigation throughout the fight. Next up, we'll see Hateful Charge. The boss will focus one player and charge to them, dealing significant damage to the first player in his path. You can block the targeted player from getting hit by standing in the line of the charge. After being hit, a debuff will be applied to you, increasing the damage you take from this ability by 500% for the next 60 seconds. The third ability is Earth-Shaking Stomp. This will knock back all the players and deal moderate damage to them. Throughout the fight, Fel Bats will target random players with Fel Vomit. Make sure to move close to the edges of the room if you're being targeted by this, because a Fel Bat will spit Fel onto this player, cluttering the space you have to fight the boss. Before facing the last boss, there is 2 more mobs that have abilities to look out for. The Risen Lancer will rush towards a ranged player with Raven's Dive. You can see the area the Lancer rushes to by looking for a brown swirly on the ground. If you stood inside this swirly, you will be stunned for 3 seconds and take significant damage, so make sure to move out in time. The Risen Swordsman will use Coup de Grace. This is a very heavy hitting tank hit, so healers make sure to top the tank up quickly, meanwhile dodging the swirlies on the ground. And that brings us to the final boss on the list, being Lord Kur'thalos. This fight is significantly harder than the other fights, so make sure that you pay attention so you won't struggle at all. This boss will consist out of 2 phases. First off, we fight Kur'thalos Ravencrest, and once we brought him to 20% HP, we face Dantalionox. During phase 1, we'll have to look out for Whirling Blade. This will target a random player and throw a blade his way that will keep bouncing between him and the wall that is being thrown at. If you get hit by this, you will take significant damage, so just make sure that you move out of the path. The tank will also be hit by Unerring Shear. This will deal heavy damage and it leaves a significant dot on the tank. So make sure that you are on your feet if you are a healer. During phase 1 there will be random casts of Shadow Bolts and periodically Dark Blasts. The Shadow Bolts will deal random damage to targeted players, but however the Dark Blast will make a purple straight line towards the room, which you will need to move out of instantly or you will get killed if you are caught inside. When Kur'thalos reaches 20% HP, the boss will phase and we will fight Dantalionox instead. About 20 seconds into this phase we will all receive a 300% damage, healing and max health buff, so save your CDs till you have this buff. During this phase the entire party will periodically get hit by Shadow Bolt Volley. This will deal significant group-wide damage, so make sure you have some mitigation on you, or if you're a healer make sure to top up the group quickly. Secondly, the boss will target a player with Stinging Swarm. This will be cast decently frequently throughout the fight, so make sure you deal with this fast. When targeted by Stinging Swarm, you will take heavy damage and you have a chance of getting randomly stunned for 0.5 seconds till the swarm dies. So make sure you kill this as fast as possible to relieve some strain from the healer. For all the Shadowlands enjoyers out there, we will see a very similar ability to those of the Lords of Dread. This ability is called Cloud of Hypnosis, and this will spawn a puddle that moves throughout the room, putting players to sleep that come in contact with them. Taking any damage though, or leaving the cloud will remove this effect. And for the final ability on the list we will see Dark Obliteration. This is fairly similar to Dark Blast, but instead it will be cast 12 times in a rotation motion around the room. You will just need to keep walking around the room to dodge these, and it is not too hard to see. And that is pretty much everything there is to cover about Black Rook Hold. I think this dungeon itself is pretty fun, with some challenging parts along the way. There's plenty of AoE here, so it will be fun to see how high the meters will go up, and it will also be fun to see how people will deal with all the aggro swapping bats. Thank you for watching, make sure to give a thumbs up if you liked the video and consider subscribing. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. or ask them while I'm streaming live on twitch.tv/JuventusTV. And I hope to catch you in the next one.